I hope you all are enjoying the event. To make it more interesting and valuable, we will now have our next fireside chat on the topic of cyber frauds in India, the assessment of year 2021 and outlook for 2022. To discuss upon it, we have with us Rashi Aditi Ghosh, Assistant Editor, Elets Technomedia, and Mr. Manish Agarwal, Head Credit Intelligence and Control, HDFC Bank. A very warm welcome to you all. Now, I would like to hand over the session to Rashi Aditi Ghosh. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello everyone, this is Rashiditi Ghosh. I'm the assistant editor of the Banking and Finance Post magazine. It's a bi-monthly magazine by Elets Technomedia, and today I'm here to welcome you all in a fireside chat that we are hosting during Elets 6th BFSI CTO Virtual Summit, which is presented by Gupshup, and it is powered by Red Hat. And today for this panel, for this fireside chat, we have with us Mr. Manish Agarwal. He is the head credit intelligence and control from HDFC Bank, one of the leading private banks in India. And we'll be having this fireside discussion on cyber frauds in India, the assessment of year 2021 and outlook for 2022. Welcome, Mr. Manish. Thank you for joining us today for this conversation.
So thank you, Rashi. Thank you so much for having me here. Good day, everybody, and it's good to meet with all of you.
Thank you. We feel happy that you're joining us here, and we'll be discussing something on a very important topic for the BFSI sector. And we all know how important cyber security is. So, moving on, taking this discussion further, we are aware how the pandemic outbreak and its continuing effect has brought everyone towards digital inclination, and some experts suggest that this digitization is also somewhere it's an outlet for cyber frauds to get into the system and compromise your security and safety. And since BFSI sector, especially the banks, are important institutions that has to maintain security, privacy, and there's a lot of data that has to be handled. So today our conversation would be around cyber security and cyber frauds. So the first question that we would be talking today would be, how do you think COVID accelerated digitization across banking? And that this changed the landscape for cybersecurity in India. So, what do you want to say? How did it change the landscape of cybersecurity for banking in India?
So, Rashi, first of all, let's understand that when we are talking about the cyber security or the frauds here, so you have to differentiate between the two things. Okay. One of the important point is that whether any vulnerability which is the banking system, and I'm talking banking system as a whole, I'm not talking specific to bank. So whether there is a fraud happening because any vulnerability has been exploited by any fraudsters in a syndicated manner, or there have been the cases where the general public have been fooled through various arts of a social engineering. Okay, and that's where they have lost the money. So what we are listening today in everyday life of ours is the second part. Okay. As far as the first one is concerned, where any vulnerability is exploited in a syndicated fashion, that's a completely different item. And we have a different regulation, a very strong regulation. And to the best of my knowledge, that here, since it's a vulnerability at the ecosystem or any banking or any specific bank, so as to say, so that is anyway fully secured, and the customers are fully secured against that, and they will have to be compensated. Here the point comes in that how a general public is getting fooled around these. Okay. And now I come to your question, and your question is very, very pertinent. That if you see that from the time the pandemic has started, which has been a March 20, okay, we will be completing the second anniversary of the pandemic officially. So globally, you can say that it started in December 19, but officially as it started in India from the lockdown in the 23rd March, that fateful day. Okay, so from that to today, the landscape has completely changed. Because the volume, the adoption of the digital channel for making payment has grown substantially. Now, luckily, we are living in a country where we have a very, very strong and vigilant regulator, so as to say. Okay. And if I get your question right, what you're talking, whether the landscape has changed, the security framework has changed. So the answer is yes. And when you talk about the security framework, this cannot be restricted only to one single institution or a bank. Okay. That has to be done at a systemic level. And when it is done at a systemic level, who can be the better one than the regulator himself? And I would again say, and if you see, and I will give you a couple of examples how this landscape has been changing. In fact, we have a regulator who has understood the need of a second factor authentication long back. Okay. The Western world is still fighting for a second factor authentication. And I understand by the second factor authentication means that whenever you do any transaction, you get any OTP, or in case you do a POS transaction, you have to put in your PIN, etc. So you would be surprised to note that even this point is being deliberated in the Western world. If they are doing a card transaction at a shops, still they can do without authenticating through PIN. Okay. If they do e-commerce transaction in a Western world, they can still happen without any dynamic OTP. So the point is the regulator or a government as a whole, while they have pushed the digital India very hard, at the same time they have created the framework. If you see the multiple regulations which have come in last 2 years, and that are intended only to secure the customer money. So like if you talk about, I'll start with the card control thing came into the existence, where the regulator said that the customers needs to have the control of what they want to do. So how much limit, how much e-commerce transactions are possible, how much past transaction is possible. So every institution is advised and mandated to provide this facility to the customer, where they can go into their net banking, their mobile banking, and set the limit for each of the transactions. Okay. The next one which came in, it talked about the tokenization. Well, the tokenization was to get effective 1st January, but because of the industry readiness, it has been deferred now to 1st July. This is one of the best thing. I don't think anybody can think of it. So today, today when we are talking in a digital ecosystem, what's happening is it's not only the transaction between the customer and the bank. There are multiple players in between. And when there are multiple players in between, you can understand that everybody has the data. And when everybody has data, so any channel if gets compromised, the customer credentials are compromised. And that's where RBI has come out with a fantastic idea that we need to have a tokenized coupon. So the card details will not be saved on the merchant side. For every specific merchant, there will be a token given, and that token will be unique to that particular customer and that particular merchant. So in case the merchant or any other middleman or a service provider, the data is breached, what the fraudsters will get? Only that token. And that token is valid only if it is coming from that particular merchant. Next one. We are one of the country where fallback transactions have been declined, are not getting approved for the ATM transactions. So let me explain to you what the fallback transactions means. That with a specific circular, the NPCI has asked effective 15th October, no transaction. If do you have a debit card? Yeah. So debit card, you must be seeing that there is a chip.
Yes, there's a chip. Yes.
Earlier there was no chip.
There was no chip. Yes.
Correct. So first phase, the regulator mandated that all the debit card must have the chip. Now they also mandated for to the banks that your ATM machine should have the chip reader. So when we are going to the ATM, it is the chip whose instructions have to be read by the machine, which is enabled to read the chip instruction. what was happening is that few machines were not reading the chip instruction, or they were not compatible, and they were reading the strip, that mega strip, you have that black strip, so the car detail, and they were sending it to issuer for the approval. So effective 15th October, it has been mandated that in India, nobody or a no issuer, so as to say, and I'm talking not specific to HDFC Bank, I'm talking about ecosystem. So those transactions are not getting approved. So what it is leading? So the skimming numbers, because it was very easy to create a chip-based card. Okay, so that is a stop. So the point I am saying is that regulator is keeping very close watch, and in and around security, I can go on and on and on. The number of advisories have come from the regulator, okay, at an industry level, the kind of things that they want to do. Even the one more thing before I conclude this particular point, okay, there is a specific circular whereby that e-mandate that we had given on our cards, they were, if they are not, so what was happening is that a lot of these guys, lot of these subscription players, so as to say, they were storing our information, and on a monthly basis they were sending it for the approval, and these transactions were not authenticated with an OTP. So even for that, RBI has come out with a specific guideline. So now these have to be mandated, mandatorily registered in a specific form, in a specific way, through a second factor authentication. So a lot of these things are stopped now. So at an ecosystem level, to answer, landscape is changing substantially. Landscape has changed substantially, and there is a lot of regulator and the government push as far as the industry push. The number of advisories that RBI has released for creating awareness, and why are they releasing such advisory? It takes back to the same old point, that it's a vulnerability. The customers are being compromised. Here the human are being compromised, not the system is getting compromised.
So, you spoke at length about how the system has changed. How have you evolved? From no chip to chip to ATMs having chips, and then modernized system to find out frauds. And you spoke about tokenization, which is going to we are having a lot of discussions on the same with our experts. So a lot of new things are going to come into system, and I think cybersecurity will see change post its implementation. So, moving on, what time or location patterns do you witness in cyber frauds getting reported? HDFC has released a report. So, on the basis, and you are an expert in that sector. So, what location, time, or patterns do you see in the cyber frauds that are getting reported in the recent times?
It's a very interesting thing. And in fact, if you ask me, Ashni, we were also surprised when we reviewed this data, okay, from a from this perspective. So what is our normal understanding? What is our what does our hunch say? Our hunch says that the frauds happen during the orders. Frauds happen with the people who are illiterate. Fraud happens with the people who do not have the knowledge about the internet banking or the internet or a digital platform, so that they are vulnerable. Fraud happens with the very elderly people only, because they are the people who are gullible. Okay, these were the myths or the thoughts that we always carried. And you will be surprised to note that the analysis that we did, and it's a very long period of analysis now, the frauds happen in rural area, because those are the people there, the level of understanding is very low. That's the thought that we had. But you will be surprised to note that our analysis found out Okay, and I'm giving you certain numbers to put in perspective, or the percentages to put in perspective. Okay, that more than 70-75% frauds are happening in the metro and urban areas. Okay, so the thoughts are that if I'm not saying that rural, so you have to view these things from the perspective that it's not about 0 and 1, it's a question of relativity. Okay, you will be surprised to note that we are in 2025, where more than 70% frauds are happening is at 22 to 50. More than 65% frauds are happening to the salaried class segment. And the biggest thing, more than 75 to 80%, 75% frauds happen between 7 a.m. to a 7 p.m. Okay, what does it signify? It signifies that the people who are committing these crimes, okay, they also have their own techniques, they also have their understanding, because they know that if they will call the customers during the odd hours. Okay, if somebody tells you that, madam, I'm calling from XYZ bank, and he calls at 9 o'clock in the evening, you have to update your KYC. Will you not be suspicious? Yeah, the bank doesn't work. At least call center will not call you after 7 o'clock. So they also know, they understand their target segment very well, and they have to win the trust of the person. So the point I'm trying to put across to you is that this problem is a very big problem. Okay, and we have to see it from the perspective that it is it is happening to you, me, and everybody. We cannot generalize it by saying that only the less educated people, or the people staying only in a faraway area, or even a housewife. You won't believe it, that maximum number of frauds, okay, a substantial, and when I'm saying, I'm saying a substantially higher number, where the male population is uh, you know fooled. So I hope that this gives you the answer to your question.
It did give me a lot of answers, a lot of surprising answers. Thank you for bringing that insight to us and our viewers. And it's actually very surprising, and you've explained it very well how it is happening, what segments are targeted, and yes, the timing of the calls are very important to to actually
Very, very
find out.
important.
Yes. So, moving on, do you think are millennials the biggest target of the fraudsters? Because generally we say that they're always on internet, doing something on the phone, on e-commerce, or maybe some other shopping or window shopping or something like that. So, are they the biggest targets of the fraudsters?
Can you repeat your question once again?
So, I was asking that are the youngster, the millennials, are the biggest target of the fraudster? Do you think?
So
Because since they're
I gave you the answer in my previous when I replied my previous your previous question,
like
that the
no.
maximum number of frauds are happening in an age bracket between 20 to 50. So
Mhm.
you can't say that it's millennial. At the same time, they are also being targeted, and you will be happy to note that we observe. Please understand why is this happening. In 2016, at the time of demonetization, even at that point of time, we were not as digitally adaptable or a digital economy as we are today.
Right.
Okay. At that point of time, we worried that why we don't have 1,000 rupees or 100 rupees or 50 rupees in our pockets. Today, each and every grocery store, even the people who come for a begging or let's say some donation or something like that, there are various things. Somebody is carrying a cow, okay, and on top of that, he has put a scanner. Yeah, I'm not sure whether you have seen that forward or not, and it's truth. Every nook and corner of India is now fully digital. You have to pay 7 rupees, 15 rupees, 12 rupees, 20 rupees. You can just scan and pay. Okay. So when this scale of payment ecosystem has changed, it is important that we also learn an hygiene process. So what actually happened is that the pace of growth has not given us a time to learn that what are the hygiene things that we have to follow. So in fact, we recognize this need, and for your information, we, as a part of International Fraud Awareness Week, the bank is conducting lot of workshop. Okay, uh, we have taken a place to conduct more than 2,000 workshops in a span of 2 to 3 months. When we are reaching out to the schools, as one of the places where we are reaching out is in school, colleges, university, because it is important that our youngsters, our teens, they learn, they understand the hygiene process that has to be followed. And our aim as a bank is to have an every household with one evangelist, okay, who can dictate or advise his household that these are the processes or a hygiene things have to be followed at home when the when the adults or anybody is doing a digital transaction.
That's wonderful that you're conducting awareness, sessions with youngsters, with school children, and every house will have an evangelist. That's such a important cause that you're catering to. So kudos to the bank and for you all for taking such a major step amid a situation where we need awareness. And young people, when they say people do listen, this is today's time because we all believe that with the youngsters they are more aware on technology than the older ones, so we definitely rely on the technology related information from them. So the next question for today's conversation would be, you already spoke about awareness trainings and sessions. So taking this forward, what practices do you think would protect us from cyber fraud attacks? Some quick tips maybe for users who are into mobile banking, internet banking, or maybe any kind of important transactions happening on internet.
So Rashi, to put in perspective, okay, this thing has to be inclusive. Please understand, and the the regulation, the ecosystem, or the banking system as a whole definitely has a responsibility towards the customers. Okay, but at the same time, you also have to appreciate that if everything is getting compromised, if your device gets compromised, if your screen gets compromised, if your OTP gets compromised, if your account detail, card details gets compromised, okay, then there will be a limit to which a control would be possible at the back end. Okay, and please also understand that the more we tighten these norms, it will also lead to the false positive, and it will increase the customer inconvenience. Okay, because the my biggest challenge, if you ask me today, as a fraud risk professional, when we do the monitoring of these transactions and we do with, so it is about identifying or settling on the right balance. Okay, because, and I'll give you a very very simple example. Today, if you go anywhere, let's say if you enter to the security of the airport, everybody gets a screen now. So that's the leg that has been created, correct? And that leads to the inconvenience, but we have no option but to go for that. Can I do a similar thing on a payment eco space? That will be very very difficult. We cannot make it difficult for our customers to do the transaction. The experience has to be a frictionless. And India as a country, we are the largest in terms of a real time settlement. So I understand, uh, you know you understand the meaning of a real-time settlement means that as and when the transaction is happening on an immediate basis, it is getting credited to the beneficiary account. There is no lag or there is no batch process. And when the settlement is happening at the real-time basis, then it becomes very, very important to have a first-time right. Because if, let's say, if you mistakenly transferred somebody a money, it is not possible for you to get it back because the amount is transferred. There is no intermediary involved. So while the bank or the ecosystem is definitely going to work on these area, and we cannot shy away from our responsibility, at the same time it is important that the customers at large, they also understand, they also, and it's again our responsibility to make them aware and spread awareness that what are the hygiene factors that they have to follow. And there are very simple hygiene factors. Okay, the simplest hygiene factor is please know that what handle the messages or the links have come. Okay, do not click on any link which is sent by any unknown number or an unknown channel. Okay, because do not download any app which gives the access of your device to the third party. Do not share your OTP or a PIN. Please understand, for God's sake, and I keep saying this for nth number of time, that if you have to receive the money, it does not require any authentication. It does not require your UPI PIN to be authenticated because you are going to receive the money. So these are the basic things that people have to follow. And once you follow this, a problem to a large extent will be settled. Listen again, fraud is ultimately a behavior. The earliest story that we have of being defrauded is into Ramayana, where Ravana came as a sage and took away Mata Sita or kidnapped Mata Sita. So fraud is a behavior. It will continue to exist. We are not saying how can we reduce it? How can we minimize it? Today, if it is 100, can I minimize it by 80, 90, 95? And I believe that we do have a scope that if these are the few hygiene factors which are followed by the customers, we can reduce this menace to a large extent.
Right. So now it's time for us to discuss the strategies by banks a bit. Maybe in one or two points, 2022 is here and COVID is still not away. We still need to sit home, maybe for a longer, for some more time. So, what do you think, being the one of the leading banks in India, what should be the strategy of banks or maybe financial institutions primarily to fight cyber frauds?
So, Rashid, there has to be an architecture in place. If you ask me, first of all, we have to be channel agnostic. The strategy has to be customer who is doing the transaction. It's not the channel through which these transactions are coming in. Okay. So once we realize this particular theme, and then we have to clearly define and create as an banking ecosystem an architecture on the authentication and authorization. Okay. So if you see that if we design an architecture in a way that there is a specific level of authentication, and authentication today the biggest problem is in the form of an OTP. Okay, so we have to adopt a multi-form factors. Okay, it may be a voice recognition, it may be a face recognition, it may be a biometric, it may be a behavioral biometrics. Okay, so an authentication is a very, very important. And we believe that there is a lot of work which has to be done across all channels. Something, in a few cases it is by design. Okay, so like if you talk about an UPI, there is a SIM binding, there is a device binding. So if the device is bound, Okay, so that's the very strongest factor of an authentication. The only challenge will come if somebody takes over your pin or makes you authenticate the transaction. Okay, at the same time, when we talk about an authentication and authorization as a separate techniques, so there are couple of more build up, or I would say the pillars of the security that we have to work on is the device. I use the word device in context with an authentication as well, but at the same time, this device has to be seen as an independent unit as well. Because today I do not meet the customer, or customer does not come to the branch with the check to do the transaction. It's the device through which the guy is entering into the ecosystem or the payment world and trying to do the transaction. So how strong the repository of the device, how strong the device assurance that we have, how are we mapping that this profiling of that particular customer, that okay, this guy, if he's coming for doing this particular transaction first time from this particular device, what are the control or a step of authentication that we need to look at it, you know, has to play a very critical and important role.
Yes, that is something that's going to be very important for consumers as well as for bank, because today during this discussion we spoke about how banks are taking initiatives to protect the customers from cyber frauds. And earlier we used to think that banks are only doing taking steps, thinking about themselves, but at length when we spoke today, you spoke about things that how customer is important for banks. When they decide on something, they strategize on something. So a lot of new things, keeping the current challenges and innovations in mind, we'll get to see in future from banks, from financial institutions. Thank you for highlighting them, and thank you for sharing the report and the a very surprising reveals from the report that you have conducted, you've done. So with this we would like to conclude this conversation here today. Thank you, Mr. Manish, for your valuable time. Thank you for joining us today at this fireside chat. And with this, we will continue the other panel discussions for today at 6th BFSI CTO Virtual Summit. Thank you for joining us today, viewers. Thanks a lot. Take care of yourself. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rashi. All the best.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you, sir and ma'am. It was one great discussion. Now, as a token of appreciation, we would like to present the certificate to Mr. Manish Agarwal, Head Credit Intelligence and Control, HDFC Bank. Thank you, sir.